Astrologically, it is time to start filling up the void. Okay, the void that I'm talking about here is the Saturn-Neptune conjunction that's happening at the end of Pisces, January 16th for the next 10, 11 days. These are the final days that Neptune will be in the sign of Pisces, and I want to talk a little bit about what has been going on with Neptune in Pisces, how empty things might have been feeling, how meaningless things might have been feeling, and how Pluto in Aquarius ultimately is the way shower for us to move forward with how we will use this emptiness, because it's not going to stay empty forever. And in fact, it is right at the point of these last 10 days where the fractal, if you will, the pattern is about to reset. And so, what we have to do is to imprint in this space our intention. Because if we don't, then the same thing that already happened will just keep happening. Okay. So, the baseline of what I think we should imprint is unconditional love. Okay. I think that's the point of life. I think unconditional love and the truth of emptiness is the point of life. And that's going to be true for Neptune in whatever sign you find it in. It's going to be true for Pisces. It's true. That is the truth that is beyond astrology. That's the truth that we can access within ourselves in the emptiness that we have within ourselves, whether you want to call that a soul or a spirit. It's the emptiness, the space in which unconditional love sits. And as time has been chugging along in my life, I have realized that we're here simply to increase our capacity. That's it. And it's not about having the right boundaries. It's not about finding the right spiritual practice. It's not even about becoming your higher self. It's about expanding your capacity to hold both the amazing things and the negative things. And that's pretty much it. As that happens, you access the truth of your emptiness more and more, the truth of that unconditional love more and more. And so, as an astrologer, I've been really, I think, very much, in fact, probably too much, about the mechanics of why astrology works, especially if these more simple truths, such as unconditional love, these are really the transcendent point of focus, right? Like, why would we spend so much time figuring out where our Mercury is and what's its relationship to Jupiter to figure out how we can mentally understand a situation and make it make sense for us, right? It's a very compelling exercise, astrology, and it's true. Like, I think that astrology is expressing the fractal truth of the positive space, if you will, if in like a painting, like the figure, but the negative space is truly the unconditional unified field of reality that essentially we are working to not self-erase, but to become the background instead of being the contours of our chart, if you will. Shifting our focus, so the place from which we are identifying, to the background, to the empty space at the back of the chart, and not to the specific placements, the specific, relationships in the chart. So, yeah, these are all things that I think a lot about, especially in this Saturn Neptune time, that's the irony of astrology, is that I do think it will be pointing us outside of the chart if we are using it correctly. It'll be always pointing us back to the background of the chart if we are approaching the chart not trying to get something out of it. And this is where I've also been, I wouldn't say struggling, but really mentally having to make like mechanical adjustments in how I show up to my astrological practice and to say, what am I even here to do? What am I even here to tell you? What am I advocating for when I give a reading? And, I would be lying. I'm not here to help you make more money or get you better in your career. Like these are things that I don't actually care about um, as an astrologer. And I don't think that the lesson of unconditional love also, I don't think that cares about whether you've hit your financial goals or your career goals. I see astrology and its logic much more as a tool to realize that you are hanging from and to let yourself like let go a little bit, is a permission giving tool instead of a restrictive tool. And again, that is based off of my thinking right now, and truly not even my thinking, but my gut knowing right now that the background is more important than the foreground. That negative space right now, especially with Saturn and Neptune, but I think forever and ever, that background space is the point. And I think that a part of each of our consciousnesses is already always there. And again, what Pluto and Aquarius, I think, is doing is killing off Pluto, our reliance on the Aquarian systems that are currently existing, and calling for a complete regeneration of what Aquarius is, astrology included. Astrology is an Aquarian archetype because it is a system of logic. It is a system of interconnected networks and ideas that all depend on each other, right? Any it is like the expression of this idea of the higher mind, but Pluto in Aquarius is destroying the higher mind in order for it to be completely regenerated. Do you see what I'm saying? And so astrology itself right now, from my perspective, is pushing us outside of astrology and pushing us almost into Pisces. Okay. Strangely enough, right? I feel like when Pluto was in Capricorn, um, and I know many people, I felt more Aquarian when Pluto was in Capricorn because Capricorn felt like it was dead. Capricorn felt like it was it was like a grave, like there was no life there anymore. And the irony is now that Pluto is in Aquarius, the Aquarian realms feel, I don't want to say dead, but they feel very well trodden already. You know what I mean? Capricorn feels a little bit more interesting now, right? Lest we slip back into thinking that achieving goals will give us our this feeling of salvation that only, you know, unconditional love will. But my point is now that Pluto is in Aquarius, I feel like very Piscean. That's the sign after Aquarius. I feel very like, wow. The only truth is the unknowable truth. The only point is um, unconditional love. And we're going to see by January 26th, when Neptune goes into Aries, we're going to see how that background consciousness of Neptune comes right into our lives, who we are, the immediacy of our every moment. And thus, in relation to Pluto and Aquarius, our perspective, right? Because that's a sextile. That's a very harmonious sextile happening with Pluto and Neptune. It's been happening for decades and it will continue to happen for another like 2 or 3 decades. And so we are deeply unified right now in a very quiet pursuit, a very meta level pursuit, because this is a first quarter sextile. It's the first 30 degrees between Pluto and Neptune. So if Neptune is completely unified objective truth, and Pluto is the reason, the deepest reason to even create the experience of feeling that truth. The relationship that they are in right now and have been or for decades is one of studying. This sextile is still emerging out of like the full cycle has truly only just begun. Saturn and Neptune haven't even hit a first quarter square with each other. That'll be in like a few decades. So I think this meta, very, very meta, higher level relationship between Pluto and Neptune right now speaks to the internalization. That's again, first quarter sextile is about internalizing the choice that you made in the new phase. So when Saturn and Neptune were still very close to each other within 45 degrees of each other, this would have been literally like a century ago. So I'm not saying that us as individuals, we don't have immediate experience with the Saturn, I'm sorry, we don't have immediate experience with the Neptune Pluto conjunction, but if you can consider where you are right now in terms of how you perceive of the ultimate truth and how you perceive of the deepest motivation in your life, they're kind of symbiotic, right? So, like, as I'm speaking, Neptune's still in Pisces, Pluto's in Aquarius. Neptune and Pisces being very symbiotic with Pluto and Aquarius speaks to like this deep, pervasive, infinite, unknowable truth that has to do with creativity, mysticism, faith, belief in unity. That is very symbiotic with the larger changes, I would say, the larger questioning of the intelligence of humanity itself. Do you see what I mean? This is very, hmm, it's very deep because there isn't so much action that wants to be taken right now. That Neptune is in a very contemplative relationship to Pluto. And so, do you see what I'm getting at? This again, and we have several more decades here of like Neptune being in a contemplative relationship to Pluto. So when Neptune moves into Aries, the contemplation is how is my individual truth part and parcel of the regeneration of our collective right now? And that's, again, this first quarter sextile is an internalizing, almost meditative, almost like you are studying the information that you are getting. And again, very high level, very meta thing that's going to keep going amidst all of the other inner planet stuff that moves and the squares and the blah 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 and the eclipses, right? Like la la la. There's so much going on. Yet for the next 2 decades, we are in this sextile with Pluto and Neptune, which is ultimate truth and our deepest motivation. Our deepest motivation being to move beyond the logic that we think we know, and the highest truth being, let's say in Aries, unconditional love for ourself. Okay? So it's basically like we're letting go of any framework of thinking, any algorithm, any rational, detached perspective, even astrology, okay, that doesn't serve the truth of how much love we are, like, doesn't serve the truth of us forgiving ourselves unconditionally for like anything. And I think that that's kind of the higher thing going on here. But I'll say it again. I know I already said it a million times. This is a deeply contemplative setup between Pluto and Neptune. And so it's for another few decades. And so, in that sense, there's no astrological rush when it comes to like the real higher influences, if you will. And I think both of these influences, Pluto and Aquarius, Neptune and Aries, are pushing us outside of astrology because in Aries, all we can trust is the present moment. And in Aquarius, Pluto wants us to let go of trying to game the system. It wants us to let go of trying to like hack the algorithm to make it work. Do you know what I mean? Astrology is always going to work, whether you like it or not, it's always going to work, whether in predictive sense or in a retrospective sense. And that's simply because everything is possible. But because we are in this void, because everything is possible, it's not even about authorship of like you making shit up so that you can be in charge of your reality. It's about your perception of life and how your perception and thus your interpretation, which is one step before, it's my opinion, one step before you get to self-authorship. Like if your perception of the world is one way, you will be authoring your life in that way. Whereas Pluto and Aquarius doesn't like, do you see what I'm getting at? You can write and tell me if you don't get it. But I just think that the astrology calls for moving beyond the astrology at this point, which isn't a reason to not get readings and to not study astrology, but it is a reason to move from your core, move from unconditional love, even when Saturn and Neptune are both in Pisces. I mean, even when Saturn and Neptune are both in Aries, you know, I don't think there's any higher truth than unconditional love. And I think that what will change when Saturn and Neptune move into Aries is just that we will be having direct experiences with that in our every day-to-day action very viscerally in a way that right now it's a very pervasive truth. But again, it is an infinite truth that is dependent on Pluto and Aquarius, which is what is your perception right now? What is your perception of the logic that makes your story that you've been telling yourself and the story that places you in a context right now? Like, what's legitimizing that? And then if you're watching this while I've uploaded it, of course, over the next week after the new moon in Capricorn, we're going to have all these planets conjunct Pluto. Venus is already very close. And so I believe at some point this week, Pisces, the moon will also be in Pisces in a few days. And so moon will be in Pisces with the North Node with Saturn and Neptune. And so we're going to be cutting very deep into these truths, into these dynamics, which essentially says that it's not a time for huge action, but it is a time to see where, because of the personal planets, where our intimate life is bringing us deeper into the Pluto and Aquarius, deeper into the desire for even higher objectivity than Pluto and Aquarius, like than astrology, higher objectivity than, the impersonal cold algorithm. You know what I mean? And then with Moon in Pisces, it's like it's really far out. It's really expanded. It could be very magical feeling, but it could be also very emotional. Um, but it's just a time to remember that, and I think I started this video, this is how I should end it. You choose right now what's going on in the void for you. And if it's anything but unconditional love, um, I don't know how far it's going to take you. That sounds like a threat. I think even more important than choosing unconditional love is you choosing what you want and collapsing internal contradiction by letting yourself choose what you want, which isn't to keep you in an echo chamber, but to untie the knot. Okay? So by simply choosing yourself in this void and continuing choosing what you want in the absence of proof, in the absence of even the right mind, right? Like these are not perspectives that I think I am fully locked into yet. I'm working on it literally every hour of every day. But I think that's the work right now. I mean, we are in Capricorn season after all, just because I mean, we'll be in Aquarius season very soon, but it has been work to be in this void space. And this isn't just any old January void space. This is like a 36-year cycle ending. And this is the beginning of us building out the truth for ourselves. But this is that, again, several day sweet spot. Okay? No pressure, truly, because it's not real. Like none of this is real. But um, really setting the precedent for yourself after you've allowed yourself to come into a void of nothingness from a space of unconditional love, creating the pattern, even just by one small new change that you're doing. Create the pattern in this void so that when Neptune steps into Aries, you know your core and you're not going to be moved by things outside of you. Okay? That is what I have. I hope you have a lovely final 10 days. Go ahead and get a reading with me if you want to talk to me about this and the dynamics in your chart, moving beyond your chart, but also all of the lovely reflections that are coherent and helpful. So that is it. Goodbye for now.